Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a series of conversations in which two chaps that make games talk about making those games. Those games are, generically speaking, tabletop miniature games, but specifically, we are going to talk about some games that we've been making quite recently. So we have two people here. My name is Mike Hutchinson. I design games such as Gaslands, A Billion Suns, and Hobgoblin. And here we have Glenn, who's designed a multitude of games, including some miniature games such as Pukeapocalypse, which may even turn up later in this conversation, but also lovely card and board games such as Moonflight and SSO. Glenn, what you been working on?
Well, yes, I've been working on Pukeapocalypse. Specifically, I've been working on a campaign system expansion for Pukeapocalypse,
Now, remind the gentle listener, what is the Pukeapocalypse?
so Pukeapocalypse is a game that Exalted Funeral will be publishing in the very, 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 very near future. We've been going back and
Have you a date? Have you a date?
the moment. It's
No is a perfectly good answer.
Well, no, because it was going to be, it was October, and then we had a little thing to do with that they need to put in a bit of cardboard to make it not sort of overly floppy and have all the punch outs pop out during like shipping or something. And so I think it was sort of going to be like mid October, and now it might be like late October, early
So there's just a piece
November.
of like grey board that needs to go in.
Yeah, but then the backing sheet needs to be resized, and so it's
Right.
really it's only like a couple of days, and it's a thing that I have literally no, like they're emailing me.
Pure production.
Yeah, they're emailing me saying, do you have any comment on this? And it's like, I mean, I genuinely,
Please proceed.
yeah, I genuinely don't have a
Yeah.
comment on the fact that a bit of cardboard needs to be put in and the backing sheet needs to be increased by like
Yeah.
seven and a half
Can it
percent.
smell minty fresh?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So it's been
Can
a
it
little.
smell faintly of vomit, as pretty much all like weirdly made cardboard does?
I mean, so it's like we have these like two weekly meetings sort of set up. It have been great all the way through development and everything, and now it's into this production stage. The last few, it's just been like, should we just do this by email rather than a proper meeting? Because it's like, yes, things are being produced by people who produce them. Lovely, and so that's it's.
Glenn Ford encounters modern office workplace.
I mean, the thing is, it's like having done several Kickstarters, I know exactly what the process is where you've got somebody that you are sort of, tied to in producing this thing and they want to hear news from you.
Hmm.
And there is no news. There is a total desert of news. Other
We're
than
still
going
going to have an hour to
every,
communicate that.
yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm aware of the process, and but I'm aware that like this time at this stage, I'm kind of the client in a way on those meetings, and they
Hmm.
like want me to feel valued, so they want to give me the meetings. But I'm like, I know there's nothing to say, guys. It's fine. I know it's not your fault. Let's just. But anyway, so that's in a very sort of the main game is in a very locked down sort of thing. So what the game is a very kit bashing driven game about horrible sort of desperate mutants at the end of the world where radiation has turned everybody's stomach acid into this horrible stuff that like melts you from the inside out, and you play by strapping up and puking that stuff into each other's faces, and you literally physically lay puke tokens across the tabletop, and you can use them to shove minis around, knock them off of buildings, push them off objectives, and if you build up enough of them in somebody, they'll eventually just burst all over the place. So it's very 80s, 90s gross out inspired stuff. They Exalted were brilliant. They got the whole look of it and feel of it straight away.
Yeah, they were like Toxic Avenger meets Cabbage Patch. We're in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so it's got a little sort of, well, it's got a progression system in it, which was like something I really wanted to put in there because I wanted to reference that sort of Necromunda Mordheimy kind of a thing.
Right.
But it has a very sort of perfunctory campaign system, which is like it's there sort of like, okay, you've done your progression, you're perfectly happy with your gangs, you've played out all the scenarios against everybody several times, you want something to make you feel like you have finished playing with these guys. Oh, here's this little 3 game campaign thing, do that, and then you can call those gangs dead and move on to the next one. I went to something much more sort of extensive and much even more sort of more timey in that sort of, it's in between games, roll a dice. Here's some probably mad shit that happens. And also something that really taps into the crafty, kit bashy thing that I wanted to get at with Pukeapocalypse, but the equivalent for a campaign game. And so the thing I've been working on is currently called Spepunking in a Giant's Colon, where this sort of horrendous mutant giant the size of a town has crawled out of the sea and died. And the currency in Pukeapocalypse is piss. And your punks conclude that if there's a giant creature that big, it must have massive bladders in there and all go tunneling into whichever orifice they can get to, looking for some glorious bladders to haul out buckets and buckets of precious piss. So the way you play is you get an big enormous piece of paper and you draw an orifice for your gang on the edge of the paper, and everyone does that, and then you link up all the orifices, so you've got like a big thing with a mouth and an arsehole and maybe an eye hole and maybe another mouth, and then everybody starts drawing organs with openings coming off them depending on which organ within the body of the giant, and eventually
there is a procedure like for this.
Yeah.
There's rules
Yeah.
how and where.
Yes, there's a set of rules, so everyone sort of starts off with their original orifice, and then you roll a dice, and that defines which new organ you generate. And some of the organs increase the dice roll, so you can't like hit a bladder immediately. And as you move through, you claim and control various organs, and you note that by coloring them in with a pen. And if you steal somebody else's organ, you color back over it with a different colored pen. And then the various organs will end up eventually linking up, and you eventually discover a certain amount of bladders. And whoever gets them the correct amount, 3 bladders at the moment, wins the campaign. There's a few things. One of the main things is that the more territory you hold, the more disadvantages you have.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole sort of campaign system is basically a headwind. Because there's a thing sometimes where people are like, well, why would I do the thing unless I get a reward for it? It's like, well, because you win by doing the thing. You want to win the camp. I shouldn't need to offer you more rewards than winning the game. Also, mad shit happens, and so that's nice. So you get a story thing, but fundamentally, I'm not giving you power-ups for claiming this territory. The winner is going to be the person who can win a game despite holding tons of territory and therefore having like huge disadvantages at the start of each game.
Right. Yeah. It's very much a handicap system where the higher you are up the league table, the more handicap you have to play with to continue to prove that you're the boss.
Well, it's fundamentally, one of the few things in the game that's probably a bit realistic. It's sort of like the Romans, the Roman Empire becoming so massive wasn't, an advantage.
They had a lot of piss to carry around.
They had so much piss to carry all over the place that that they collapsed under their own piss weight, and so it's very much a game about collapsing.
It's basically historically accurate.
Your own weight of urine, and therefore 100% historically accurate.
Yeah.
So we're knocking that together. Exalted have expressed interest in such, and so
is this like at the minimum you'll make it a PDF thing, and if of interest it might end up being a 16-page pamphlet-y thing, or what do you reckon?
I don't know at the moment. What I'm going to do is I want to put together a thing that hangs together fairly solidly and does some weird, fun, sexy things, and then show it to Exalted to see if they want to give it a physical version.
So on holiday, one of the activities that we did as a group of parents and young children was we got one of those coloring in tablecloths, but this one was provided to us with a set of washable fabric markers, and so we colored in this giant tablecloth, and then one can simply wash it in the washing machine and then it gets clean again. So I can't help but think that like some way of creating essentially like the assholes and eyeballs and stuff, so that like there's a starting place and then you draw on with the fabric markers, and like the product is essentially like a tablecloth with a pamphlet, would be fucking cool.
That, I mean, that would have a certain fun to it. I don't know. It's like I realized like my entry for the one box war game is this thing where you physically draw onto the board as you're
Well,
playing.
this is because this is how you play test. You're like, I don't need terrain, I've got rollout paper.
Partly this is very much how I play test anyway. I've literally like 3 rolls of blank wallpaper sat on the rack above me. But partly because I think that there's something both really nice about having like the map of your campaign or your game or whatever else it is. And also there's just something inherently, and there's something lovely about coloring in. Coloring is great. It's tons
Yep,
of fun.
can't lie about that.
Everyone likes coloring in. And there's something inherently like, I'm fascinated by what it's like to scribble things out and cross over them and ruin them and break them in those sorts of ways, and to do it in a way
Yeah.
that's like totally harmless. You're losing a bit of paper, you know. It's not like getting someone to mess up. It's like legacy games get you to sort of rip apart an entire very precious and expensive game, whereas something going like mess up a bit of paper, it's like, yeah, cool, fine, fair enough, you still get that sort of that fun of it. Yeah, anyway, so I'm knocking that around, getting into a shape where I can like show it to Exalted Funeral in all of its majesty and get them to immediately offer to print 10,000 copies of it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's fun. It's enjoyable. I'm also sticking in a few extra factions, which is always fun to just write faction stuff and silly scenario stuff. And it's much more on the end of the sort of the gazing out the window, making mad shit up bit of game design, which is always the best part of it before you have to grind through the horror of playtesting.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what else are you?
Well, so yeah, speaking of factions, so one of the things that I haven't been working on but should have been working on is finishing the factions for Space Gits. Um, so Space Gits is a miniatures skirmish game that was inspired by the chapter that we wrote together in our upcoming textbook, The Fundamentals of Tabletop Miniature Games Design, Designer's Handbook, available later this year, we distinctly believe and hope. Anyway, we were writing the chapter on uses of dice and where you can stick them. And we were talking about all the various hilarious physical and positional possibilities and dexterity possibilities of dice that are massively underexplored in miniature games specifically. And so yeah, that was just like that was in my brain, and the little wind of an idea came to me about drunk space orcs sort of staggering around a small play area, trying to pick up loot and vaguely shoot bullets in each other's in the direction of each other. And so that's what Space Gits is, and it uses dice, and you throw the dice into the playing area, and you have to move towards the dice or shoot towards the dice, and so it's got a distinct dexterity. Oh my goodness, that reminds me of a game I haven't told you about, which is possibly the best game I've ever designed in my entire career. We'll get to that in a minute. Speaking of dexterity games, oh my god, it's so good. I just don't know what to do with it. Space Gits is
No
out.
way we're gonna have time to talk about that in this
I
conversation.
know it's gonna just have to be. We'll just have to leave it hanging there. What is this wondrous game? Oh my god, it's so good. So Space Gits, it's out there in beta on my itch Planet Smasher Games itch.io. But the thing that I need to finish, and it's particularly critical that I finish this because the artist is hired and he is busily working on the first couple of vignettes. Really exciting. Got a very so the name of the artist is Till Forster, and he is working on some beautifully energetic kind of sketches. Everything's going to be I don't know, they're orcs, but they're I'm trying to think what the comparison points are. I'm not going to be able to. It's impossible to describe artwork with words. But anyway, they're good and energetic and silly and fun, and everyone kind of looks a little bit mutated, and so we're looking like, it's as much like sort of Trauma and Todd Browning's Freaks as it is like normal presentations of orcs, because this game is about the orcs that haven't gone off to war. This is like in the orc city where all the like all the reprobate orcs that aren't in the army are all just like tearing the place to pieces whilst everyone's gone. So yeah, so that's what trying to communicate that through the glee of rioting. It's very topical.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, so I'm supposed to be writing the factions. They are just like they're just like one rule each, but it's figuring out which factions to put in and how many to put in, and which ones of them are obviously bent and which ones of them are not going to be fun or undermine the things. So yeah, so that's one of the things that I've been working on, is tinkering around with those so I can get those out into the hands of the beta testers.
Lovely. So for myself, the other things that I've been kicking around are a bunch of well, there's a bunch of smaller ideas, and there's an idea that's been kicked off to the publisher. So Playlandia, that I think I spoke about previously on this
I
channel,
believe so.
is a cooperative minis game, but not a you're all on one side like fighting something else, but what I term a proper co-op, in that you can't really, play the main game solo in it.
Yeah, it's sort of, I kind of look at it like a cooperative sports puzzle game.
Yeah. The so again, it's a televised death sport because everything should
Sure,
be,
why not?
and you lay down cards for your movement, and you have to coordinate the movement between you and the other person to like get around the death arena, etc., etc. So you can't really play it like without another person. But anyway, so I sent off to the publisher who was interested in it, whatever, 12 months ago, whenever I spoke to them last. I
And
said,
is it this sort of at the this is post pitching but not quite signed? Is that where we're at?
so it's pitched, it's agreed in principle. Then I went away and basically didn't talk to the publisher for like over 12 months.
Oh, pro move.
um, because he was like, "Yes, I definitely want to, but I've got stuff going on." I was like, "Okay,
Right.
fair enough. I've got this other thing that I'm writing, which was Pukeapocalypse.
Yeah.
So I don't know when I'll be able to get to this. I'll write it and let's send it through to you. I've written it. I've play tested all the bits of it. I'm really happy with it.
Yeah.
I've come back to him with a right, here it is now. Are you still interested?" And the response was, "Yes, I am definitely still interested."
Cool.
We'll
Nice.
so that's sitting there in an in tray. As I said earlier, Borders is settled for more or less for me mentally. Pukeapocalypse is fairly settled. So I'm trying to move on to the next couple of ideas. I've got my FDM printer working.
Oh, well done.
So I've been printing terrain basically, because I want to have like a big old mansion for the um, PG Woodhouse game that I've been fiddling with, and I want it to be
Finally, it's coming, people. It's coming.
yes, well, I want it to be template movement, and I want it to be template movement within like a constrained place, like within a building, because that's where I want to get the fast side of it, of like moving people's templates around so they can't like get past furniture and that sort of thing, because it is meant to be a farcical like comedic world. And I think that the fact that, because when I first read the rules for Redwood, which we have to play, and I now have a copy of Redwood, that's the thing where rather than like with Gaslands, you use your template, then you remove your template, and there's no like worries about somebody being able to use somebody else's template. In Redwood, I pick a template. You are not allowed to pick it. That is my template for this turn. You pick a template. Then next turn, I can use any template other than the one I picked last turn. And if I pick the one that you picked, I have
Right, which is a very board gamey like action selection sort of.
Yeah, it's a very board.
It wouldn't make a lick of sense in Gaslands, but like if you're approaching this from a board game perspective, yeah, of course. Like,
Yeah, no, absolutely. But also,
restricted action selection.
yeah. But also, like with a game that's meant to be about farce
Mm.
and in the sort of a PG Woodhouse comedy, having like certain templates more locked off and not available to you is potentially a good thing because people then have to move in a weird and sort of more unpredictable way.
I'm getting Robot Rally vibes off of this already.
A bit of that, a bit of sort of like the relationship between how so
I thought
like
I was going to go through this door. I've fallen over this chaise long.
well, yeah, so hierarchies of like characters when they place their template push templates that they overlap off of their template until they're not overlapping anymore.
Right.
So if you're like, Roderick Spode and you're gonna like sideswipe um Bertie Wooster, he has to swerve out and go in a different direction.
Okay.
So it's like fiddling with that. There's so I've got a set of templates, and now I need to get. I want to get like a nice looking internal like mansion thing, and I'm trying to go through various 3D printing jobs to get the one that I want and the right space of it. So that's the thing that's going on, and then I
That's
really
mad that you're not using a flat like a two-dimensional sort of dungeon tile solution to this. I love it.
I I I have been, and I would for like other people advise that they do this. And obviously, the first one I was prototyping it is big sheet of paper,
Yeah, scribbled it out.
drawing the yeah, obviously because that's lit. And I literally had a big like roll of wallpaper with a mansion drawn on it and furniture. Like
Right.
I've got 3D printed sort of and bought because I've been thinking about this for a while, furniture for it. But I found like I was being a bit dishonest with myself about whether something was like overlapping a door or things of that nature. Um, and I want to like really get to grips with the physicality of the templates, if only for me.
Mm.
And I want to do that by having a mansion that has physical walls and physical doors that need to be like opened and templates need to be like poked through to see what it feels like and have a more of a reality as to whether you can fit this template through that door or not. Even if no other human being ever plays it like that, I want to play it like that to see what the experience is and whether the again Redwood has this lovely thing where one end of the template is like a sort of thick ring thing that you clip onto the base of the mini, and then it goes thin in the middle, and then it bulges out at the far end to a little circle that you put, and everyone gets two minis, and so you clip one mini. The template into one of the minis, you put the other mini on the little circle at the end, and then you remove the other mini and the template. So there's no sort of
Oh, what sacrilege! Wow.
but so there's no doubt about like putting the template down, moving the mini.
It's so curious to watch a board game designer
It's
wrap up
really
miniatures.
we genuinely have to play Redwood because it is absolutely fascinating how they've solved several of the problems. And I love that one of the first rules are touch a template, use it. Because
Yes.
exactly the sort of same experience. But yeah, look at those templates and like the way they thin out and fan out and they bulge in different places. I want to get a physical feel of the templates in the space. So that I'm sort of I've seen a mansion that I think will be right for it, and I've because I've just finished printing another building that I don't think is quite right, but I still want the whole thing printed. Um,
Well, I mean, look, if you don't have a use for it, it can appear in some Perilous Tales photographs later on in the story.
well, I might do use some buildings now that the FDM's running.
Yeah, because my FDM was dead on arrival, sadly.
Yeah, had some issues. And also, I really want to get back to the thing you've described as the miniatures game of the cinematic gaze.
Mm.
But there's this idea about like a bit of subliminal, the video game subliminal, and a bit of like taking viewpoints, and partly inspired by a book that I mentioned in my video about designing my one box war game about feminist war games and things.
Mm.
And about like taking different perspectives and different ways of because I'm very interested in non-combat tabletop games and just doing dumb stuff, and I really think there's a very weird, interesting game about the way the tabletop looks differently when you get down to the miniature's eye view, and really making the game about that, and
Hmm.
being like I say, so Superliminal, for people who don't know, we talk about it more than once on the channel, is this video game where once, if you like pick up a block and move it closer to you and then drop it, it becomes as big as it was closer to you whilst far away, and then you walk over to it and it's massive, and it plays all those sorts of things. I'm sort of thinking like, okay, if I've got a mini like
It still does my nut in just thinking about it, and I've played it twice.
it's a great game. If I've got a mini here on the tabletop and a mini here on the tabletop, and I want this mini to be able to cross a certain gap, but
Yeah.
they can't because there's a gap, and then this mini moves around so that another piece of terrain lines up so it looks like there's a bridge across that gap, and that means I can then move this mini across the bridge so long as the other mini is lined up right. But I'm
I mean, I know this isn't kind of in your, this isn't really in your milieu, it's not really your texture, but like using a mobile phone camera for this, so that like you take the snap and then you can show to your opponent this is what's happening. Like there's so many weird illusions can happen when you, because I take quite a lot of photographs of miniatures, and I, when you bring the camera phone down to that level, weird stuff happens that you just don't see even when you're leaning down to do it. So I don't know, like that just
yeah,
feels to me really interesting.
yeah, and I really, the more I think about that, the more I want to get into that thing and do something insane with it. So
Yeah.
those are the things I'm going to be working on once I get my one box war game play tested, and the Pukeapocalypse Pukeapocalypse campaign written up and sent off. Those will be my next couple of jobs.
Very
So
cool. All right. Well, in the last couple of minutes, then let me just discuss this other game that I've been playing with my daughters and my young cousins. So I mentioned in the last video that I'd been prototyping some Gaslands board game ideas, and in scattergunning in lots of different directions to sort of see where fun might be had, I hit on a couple of ideas for like a Gaslands board game idea that was more like dexterity based. And so the first idea was kind of obvious, which is like, okay, what if it's road gits and it just uses the same mechanics as space gits? You roll dice, and that's where your car has to drive towards. So to get around a corner, you have to kind of like have a few dice that are in different spots, and you can curve around and whatever. And maybe shooting is like you put a little dice on the top of the mini, and you the car, and you flick the dice off the top of the car. And wouldn't that be great? And it's sort of so obvious that I didn't even bother writing it yet. I'll prototype that at some point. But instead, the thing that I did prototype was what would a flicking version of Gaslands, like what would I haven't super glued the wheels of my Hot Wheels look like? And so I, as with many things, like your go-to equipment is the roll of blank wallpaper. My go-to equipment is a box of Jenga blocks. So I got a box of Jenga blocks, and I made an equivalent sized track to the normal demo table that we do for demoing Gaslands. And I used bits of masking tape to represent the gates so that they were completely flat. And I set up some cars on the starting line, and I started flicking them to try and navigate round. And after a few kind of minutes of flicking and scratching my head, I had got this sort of basic system of like, okay, so you get a flick, and you have to flick the rear end of the vehicle, and if you crash into something, then you have to roll some dice. And if you've crashed into something, then you can flick any part of the vehicle, which allows you to kind of get out of a nasty spot. And after a bit of iteration, I ended up with this dice system where if you crash, you have a dice cup, and if you crash, you take one of these sort of crash dice and you put it into your cup. You now have one more crash dice than you had before. And then you roll all the dice in your cup, and they've got icons on them, which broadly speaking either fix the dice and you put it back into the shed pool, or give a little token to the next player round, which is a free flick token. And if you crash into someone, you roll not, you put a crash dice in, and you roll not only your crash dice, but also an orange smash dice, which can do some things like put yellow dice into the person that you've crashed into's cup, as well as giving free flick tokens. So then when the next person comes around, if they've got some free flick tokens, they have their go. They can have a couple of extra goes. If they crash, that like aborts their go, and they have to discard the rest of their free flick tokens. And I've explained it now to 6 children under 10, and all of them just immediately went away and started playing it by themselves unprompted, and were like, yes, this is the thing I want to do with the rest of my day, is play this flicking Hot Wheels cars and rolling little yellow dice into dice cups. It's majestic. And so the older of the cousins on the holiday, the family holiday it was just on, he went away and he came back the next day, and he had used coasters as ramps, and he'd put stickers on some of the Jenga blocks, and if you crashed into those, you got power-ups, which he hadn't figured out how to do power-ups. He said, maybe you have some pieces of paper or something. I was like, yeah, cards, deck of cards, it'll be all right, we'll do it. So my 7-year-old daughter Emily has christened it Flicking Heck. So that's its current working title. I haven't come up with a better one. But yeah, Flicking Heck is like I don't have a contact at Mattel. Maybe I can find one through my old work. But like, if this thing was in a box with like a couple of custom dice and like some plastic terrain that like made like ramps and crash barriers, like, oh my God, this is such a good game. It's so fun. And so yeah, I've played that like 2 dozen times already. It's so good.
So just because I haven't sat around and tried doing it, is there any way of like flicking a Hot Wheels car to get it to like curve, or do you have to bounce off stuff?
Surprisingly, and I don't know if it depends on the car, you can do some pretty interesting like curvy things. Like you can get them to drive round in curves. Not, I can't make them do it reliably yet, but you can get them to do some pretty awesome things. And you can also get them to like skid round so that they go through a tight spot. And then as the friction changes, they then start to roll in the same direction. They do some like madly Fast and the Furious cinematic stuff. Like they've been making Hot Wheels for a long time. They know how to make these things move
Well, yeah, no,
gloriously.
it would be.
And then the other thing is that some Hot Wheels cars have like spoilers and stuff. So I started experimenting. I was like, well, what if I like ping them and then they can jump over terrain? But of course, it's like almost a 50% flip where it's like, if I land on my roof, well, I'm dead. Like that's it. They're out. But if he lands on his wheel, it's like, whoa,
Well,
I have to roll my crash dice then.
if you were going to do it, you would want to talk to somebody involved with making things like Hot Wheels, because somebody out there knows like where to put the weight on a Hot Wheels, or
Mm.
where to put tension on the axles or whatever to make it do certain things when you flip. Because there's a little finger skateboarding thing. What's it called? Tech deck or something. You see doing the actual skateboarding tricks with those tech decks. Like there's like YouTube videos of people with those little finger skateboards, and they run them along and then flick them and get them.
Right. And presumably the first time they made one of those, it didn't do that. And then they had to get cleverer and cleverer.
Yeah, somebody somewhere understands the actual product design behind that thing.
Yeah, so like Magic Wands, somebody at Mattel is watching this podcast and goes, yes, Flicking Heck is exactly the product that we need for Christmas 28. Like, we'll do it. Um, I mean, Otherworld is like, I figure out how to get like, long pack to make metal diecast cars for a cost or acquire them for a cost that's reasonable. And I just make this damn thing myself with some little wooden crash barriers with stickers on or something. But
Yeah,
it's such a fun game. I couldn't believe how it came together.
yeah. I bet there's ways of like doing other things aside from diecast cars that it would work for. But yeah, no, that sounds splendid. That's a big product design jobby to sort of get that one to work out.
Yeah, good, particularly because like the game is basically done now. It's done in a way that like I know it's done because I wouldn't want to add more rules, because if I added more rules, my 7-year-old daughter wouldn't leap out of her bed in the morning and be like, I want to do the Flicking Heck game. Like that's what I need to be doing right now.
Well, if you want to see Flicking Heck in your local store, join this petition to Mattel. No, go
Yes.
down into the link section directly below this video and sign up to Mike's or my Patreons. Mike's if you want to see Flicking Heck, mine if you want to see any of
Or to
the
draw a
various.
giant's asshole.
Yes, a game about ramming yourself up the rear end of a giant. I hope we talked about that in this video, because otherwise it's gonna be a really
Totally out of context.
just completely out of
That was
context.
half an hour ago.
Yeah.
I think it was.
Swing by, join our various Patreons, gain the wondrous goodness that they offer you when you do so. Stop by our Discord, where the one box challenge is in full swing at the moment. Go past our various websites and buy games from us, which we do sell. As you're going past those links, swing down into the comment section. Tell us about which of the games we are noodling on at the moment you think sound most interesting and you would like us to most rapidly complete and get into your sweaty little hands. Hit the like and subscribe buttons. But for now, for this episode of Rule of Carnage, I think it's going to be thank you and goodbye. So, bye-bye.
Bye.